The translator was late. Then the cleaning lady read the contract and shocked everyone. Welcome back to our channel, where real stories touch real hearts. Before we dive into today's incredible tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss stories like this one. And hey, drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're listening from right now. Are you tuning in from New York, maybe São Paulo, or perhaps somewhere completely unexpected? We love connecting with our global family. Today's story will absolutely blow your mind. It's about assumptions, hidden talents, and how one woman's courage changed everything in a Manhattan law firm. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into this remarkable journey together. Chapter 1. The Morning That Changed Everything. The autumn rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Henderson & Associates, one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms. On the 42nd floor, the conference room buzzed with nervous energy as some of the city's most powerful business executives adjusted their ties and checked their watches for the third time in 5 minutes. Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart quietly along the hallway, her worn sneakers making barely a whisper against the polished marble floors. At 53, she had been cleaning these same offices for nearly 8 years, arriving every morning at 6 a.m. to ensure everything was pristine before the lawyers and their clients arrived. Her graying hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite her modest uniform, there was something dignified about the way she carried herself. "Where is that translator?" snapped Richard Henderson, the firm's senior partner, his usually perfect composure cracking as he paced near the mahogany conference table. "The Brazilian delegation has been here for 20 minutes, and we can't even begin the negotiations." The Brazilian executives sat uncomfortably around the table, occasionally exchanging words in Portuguese while glancing at their American counterparts with growing concern. This was a multi-million-dollar merger between Henderson's client, Techflow Industries, and the Brazilian company Innovair Solutions. Everything had been planned down to the minute, except for one crucial detail. "Sir, I've called the translation service 3 times, said Jennifer Walsh, Henderson's usually unflappable assistant, her voice tight with stress. "The translator was in a car accident on the FDR Drive. They're trying to send someone else, but it won't be for at least 2 hours. Henderson's face reddened. 2 hours? The São Paulo Stock Exchange opens in 4 hours. If we don't get these contracts signed and filed before then, we'll lose the entire deal to the Frankfurt Group." Maria continued her work, methodically emptying wastebaskets and dusting furniture, but her ears picked up every word. She had cleaned this conference room hundreds of times, had seen deals made and broken, fortunes won and lost. Usually, she remained invisible to these powerful people, just another piece of the building's infrastructure. "Maybe we should try Google Translate," suggested junior associate Michael Chen, immediately regretting the words as Henderson's glare could have frozen the Hudson River. "Google Translate? For a $50 million acquisition?" Henderson's voice rose an octave. "Are you completely insane?" Dr. Eduardo Silveira, the lead Brazilian negotiator, cleared his throat and spoke in heavily accented English. "Mr. Henderson, we understand the situation, but we have commitments in São Paulo. If we cannot proceed soon, we must consider other options." The room fell silent, except for the rain against the windows and the soft sound of Maria's cloth against the conference table's surface. She had moved closer to the table, ostensibly to clean the area around the documents, but her dark eyes were scanning the Portuguese text spread across the mahogany surface. "I'm going to call the judge," Henderson muttered, pulling out his phone. "Maybe we can get an extension on the filing deadline." "That won't work," said Sarah Miller, the firm's corporate law specialist. "Judge Peterson is in federal court all day, and besides, the Brazilian Securities Commission won't wait. The window closes at market open, period." As the lawyers huddled in increasingly desperate conversation, Maria found herself staring at the contract's Portuguese text. The words seemed to jump off the page at her, each clause and subclauses as clear as if they were written in her native language. Because, of course, they were. She had been born in São Paulo, had spent the first 25 years of her life there before emigrating to New York, but that was a lifetime ago, back when she was Dr. Maria Santos, before the economic crisis, before the divorce, and before everything fell apart, and she had to start over in a new country with nothing but determination and a willingness to work any job that would pay the bills. The Brazilian executives were growing restless. Dr. Silveira whispered something to his colleague, Dr. Ana Ferreira, who nodded grimly. Maria caught every word. They were discussing whether to leave and pursue the deal with the German company instead. "Mr. Henderson," Dr. Silveira said, standing slowly, "perhaps we should reschedule. This is not the professional environment we expected for such an important transaction. No, please, just give us a few more minutes, Henderson pleaded, his desperation now obvious to everyone in the room. The translator will be here any moment. But Maria could see in the Brazilians' faces that they had already made their decision. They were politely gathering their materials, preparing to leave. 8 years of cleaning these offices had taught her to read people, to understand the subtle signals that indicated when a deal was dying. She looked at the contract again, her mind automatically translating the complex legal language. There was something in Clause 15 that didn't look right, something that would heavily favor the American side in a way that seemed almost deceptive. Her conscience wrestled with 8 years of invisibility, 8 years of being just the cleaning lady who wasn't supposed to notice anything. Dr. Silveira was shaking hands with Henderson, the polite smile that marked the end of negotiations. "We will be in touch through our New York office, Mr. Henderson. Perhaps next month we can—" "Excuse me," Maria said quietly, her voice barely audible above the rain. The room froze. Every head turned toward her, as if a piece of furniture had suddenly spoken. "I'm sorry," she continued, her heart pounding but her voice growing stronger. "I couldn't help but notice. I can read the contract." Chapter 2. The Revelation. The silence in the conference room stretched like a taut wire. 12 of the most powerful business minds in 2 countries stared at the woman in the cleaning uniform who had just interrupted their multi-million-dollar negotiation. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her cleaning cloth, but she kept her chin up, meeting their gazes with quiet dignity. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Henderson's voice was barely controlled, as if he couldn't quite process what he had just heard. "I said I can read the contract," Maria repeated, her slight accent more pronounced now due to nerves. "I speak Portuguese fluently. I could help translate until your professional translator arrives." Dr. Silveira's eyebrows rose, and he exchanged a glance with Dr. Ferreira. They began speaking rapidly in Portuguese, testing her. "Você realmente entende o que estamos dizendo?" he asked. "Sim, eu entendo perfeitamente," Maria responded without hesitation. "Nasci em São Paulo e vivi lá por 25 anos antes de vir para os Estados Unidos." The Brazilian executives' faces showed genuine surprise and growing interest. Dr. Ferreira leaned forward. "Que bairro de São Paulo?" "Vila Madalena," Maria answered. And then, seeing the recognition in their eyes, she added, "Perto da Rua Harmonia." "Conhece?" "Conheço muito bem," Dr. Silveira exclaimed, his formal demeanor softening. "Das minha irmã mora lá." Henderson looked back and forth between them, completely lost. What are they saying? What's happening? Jennifer Walsh stepped forward, her voice uncertain. "Sir, I think she's actually communicating with them." "This is ridiculous," Henderson snapped. "She's a cleaning lady. This is a $50 million deal, not a conversation at a grocery store." The words hit Maria like a physical blow, but she had heard worse in her 8 years of invisibility. She had learned to swallow her pride, to accept that her PhD in international business from USP meant nothing in this new country where she was starting over. But today, something was different. Today, she couldn't just walk away. "Mr. Henderson," she said quietly, "I understand your concern, but Dr. Silveira just said that if this meeting fails, they're prepared to sign with the German company this afternoon. You have about 5 minutes before they leave for good." Henderson's face went pale. "How do you know that?" "Because I understood every word he said to Dr. Ferreira." Maria took a deep breath. "I have a doctorate in international business from the University of São Paulo. I specialized in cross-border mergers and acquisitions. I know this isn't ideal, but if you need someone who can read and understand this contract right now, I'm here." The room erupted in whispers. Michael Chen leaned over to Sarah Miller. "Did she just say she has a doctorate?" Dr. Silveira stood up, his expression serious but not unkind. "Senora, disculpe, but why are you working as a cleaning lady if you have such qualifications?" Maria felt 8 years of suppressed emotions rising to the surface. "Because sometimes life doesn't go according to plan, Dr. Silveira. Sometimes you lose everything and have to start over, and the only job you can find is cleaning offices while you try to rebuild your life." Her voice was steady, but Henderson could see the pain behind her words. For the first time in the hour-long crisis, he really looked at her, not as the invisible cleaning lady, but as a human being who had just revealed herself to be far more than anyone had assumed. "This is insane," whispered junior associate Tom Bradley to his colleague. Dr. Ferreira addressed Maria directly in Portuguese. "If you truly understand contracts, then tell me, what is the main concern we should have with Clause 15? Maria didn't hesitate. The liquidation clause is structured to heavily favor the American side. If the merger fails within the first 2 years, Innovair Solutions would forfeit not just their initial investment, but also their intellectual property rights to 3 key patents. It's not a fair clause. Dr. Silvera's eyes widened. He grabbed the contract and flipped to clause 15, scanning it quickly. After a moment, he looked up at his colleague with alarm. Ana, ella está certa. This clause is much more aggressive than we understood. Henderson stepped forward, his desperation overriding his prejudice. What exactly is she saying? She's saying, Dr. Ferreira replied in English, that your contract contains a clause that we missed. A clause that would be, how do you say, devastating to our company if certain conditions occur. What kind of clause? Sarah Miller asked, moving closer to examine the document. Maria looked at Henderson, waiting for permission to continue. The rain continued to beat against the windows, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of Manhattan traffic created a steady hum. The entire deal, millions of dollars, hundreds of jobs, years of planning hung in the balance. Tell them, Henderson said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Please tell them what the clause says. Maria took a deep breath and began to explain, first in Portuguese to the Brazilian executives, then in English to the American team. As she spoke, her confidence grew. This was her world, her expertise. For the first time in 8 years, she wasn't just the cleaning lady. She was Dr. Maria Santos again. But as she continued to translate and explain the contract's intricacies, she began to notice something troubling. The more she read, the more she realized that this wasn't just a simple case of miscommunication. There were deliberate ambiguities in the English translation, subtle changes that would significantly disadvantage the Brazilian company. Someone had intentionally crafted this contract to deceive the Brazilian negotiators, and Maria was about to discover exactly who that someone was. Chapter 3. The Discovery. As Maria continued translating the contract, her expression grew increasingly troubled. The Brazilian executives leaned forward, hanging on her every word, while the American lawyers watched with a mixture of amazement and growing unease. The rain had softened to a gentle patter against the windows, but the atmosphere in the room had become electric with tension. Wait, Dr. Ferreira said, holding up her hand as Maria explained another clause. Tuas, are you saying that in the Portuguese version, we retain rights to the Mexico market, but in the English version, those rights transfer to TechFlow? Maria nodded gravely. That's exactly what I'm saying. The Portuguese text clearly states that Innovair Solutions maintains exclusivity in all Latin American markets except Brazil, but the English version, she paused, double-checking the document. Now the English version says all South American markets except Brazil. The difference between Latin America and South America excludes Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. Henderson's face went white. That's impossible. Our translation service is the best in the city. They wouldn't make such a basic geographical error. Mr. Henderson, Maria said carefully, I don't think this was an error. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of the city below. Dr. Silvera pulled out his phone and began photographing the relevant pages of both versions of the contract. What are you suggesting? Sarah Miller asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. Maria looked directly at Henderson, her years of invisibility having taught her to observe and remember everything. I'm suggesting that someone deliberately altered the translation to favor the American side. The Portuguese version promises terms that the English version doesn't deliver. That's a very serious accusation, Henderson said, his voice low and dangerous. It's not an accusation, Maria replied calmly. It's an observation. The discrepancies are too consistent and too favorable to one side to be coincidental. Michael Chen stepped forward. His face flushed. Are you saying someone in this firm deliberately sabotaged the translation? Before Maria could answer, Dr. Silvera stood up abruptly. Mr. Henderson, we need to speak privately with our team. This is a very serious matter. Of course, Henderson said, but his eyes never left Maria. So perhaps we could take a 15-minute break. As the Brazilian executives filed out of the conference room, whispers filling the hallway, Henderson turned to face his team. The atmosphere was toxic with suspicion and fear. How the hell did this happen? He demanded. Who was responsible for vetting the translation? Sarah Miller shifted uncomfortably. The translation was handled by Apex Language Services, the same company we've used for 3 years. But, she paused, looking at her colleagues. But Tom Bradley was the associate who liaised with them on this project. All eyes turned to Tom, whose face had gone ashen. I followed all the normal procedures. I sent them the contract. They sent back the translation. I reviewed it for legal formatting. You reviewed it? Henderson's voice rose. "You don't speak Portuguese. I reviewed it for formatting and legal structure," Tom stammered. "Now the translation company is supposed to handle accuracy. That's literally what we pay them for." Maria, who had been quietly organizing her cleaning supplies, looked up. "Mr. Henderson, may I ask who at Apex Language Services handled this particular translation?" Henderson looked at her with surprise. "Why would you know anything about that?" "Because," Maria said slowly, "I've been cleaning these offices for 8 years. I've seen documents, heard conversations, noticed patterns. Tom Bradley has been taking a lot of personal calls lately, and I've overheard him mention money troubles, gambling debts, specifically." The room exploded in chaos. Tom Bradley shot to his feet. "How dare you? You're just a cleaning lady. You have no right to—" "To what?" Maria's voice was steel. "To notice that you've been staying late, making phone calls about payments and deadlines, to observe that you've been nervous and distracted for weeks, to see that you've been meeting with someone from Apex Language Services in the lobby after hours." Henderson's face was a mask of controlled fury. "Tom, is this true?" She's lying," Tom said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She's trying to deflect attention from her own interference in our business." Dr. Ferreira appeared in the doorway. "Excuse me, but we've just received a call from our legal team in Sao Paulo. They've been reviewing the preliminary contract terms we sent them yesterday, and they found several other discrepancies between what we understood and what appears in the English version." Maria wasn't surprised. She had been reading the contract for 20 minutes now, and the pattern was clear. "How many discrepancies?" she asked. 17 major ones," Dr. Ferreira replied, "each one favoring the American side." Henderson closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of the situation crashing down on him. When he opened them, his voice was deadly quiet. "Tom, I'm going to ask you one more time. Did you have any inappropriate contact with anyone at Apex Language Services?" Tom Bradley's composure finally cracked. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. I owed money to some very dangerous people, and Marcus from Apex said it would just be small changes. Nothing that would hurt anyone." The confession hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Jennifer Walsh gasped audibly. Michael Chen shook his head in disbelief. Sarah Miller began frantically taking notes. "You corrupted a $50 million deal," Henderson said, his voice barely controlled. "You've potentially destroyed our relationship with one of Brazil's largest companies, and you've exposed this firm to criminal liability." "I never meant for it to go this far," Tom pleaded. "I just needed the money." And Marcus said, "Get out," Henderson said quietly. "Sir, Get out!" Henderson roared. "Security will escort you from the building. Consider yourself fired and under investigation." As Tom Bradley was led away by security, the room fell into stunned silence. Maria stood quietly by her cleaning cart, having witnessed the destruction of a man's career and the near collapse of a major business deal. Dr. Silveira returned to the conference room, his expression grim. "Mr. Henderson, we need to discuss how to proceed. Our board in Sao Paulo is very concerned about these irregularities." Henderson looked at Maria, this woman who had single-handedly exposed the fraud and saved the deal from being a complete disaster. "Dr. Santos," he said, using her title for the first time, "would you be willing to help us create an accurate translation of this contract?" Maria looked at the powerful lawyers, the Brazilian executives, the millions of dollars in documents spread across the mahogany table. 8 years ago, she had been forced to abandon her career and start over as a cleaning lady. Now, unexpectedly, her expertise was desperately needed. "I'll help," she said simply. "But I have one condition." Henderson raised an eyebrow. "What condition?" "I want to review the entire contract structure, not just translate the words. If I'm going to put my reputation on the line, I want to make sure this deal is fair to both sides." Dr. Ferreira smiled for the first time all day. "I think we can agree to that." As Maria pulled up a chair to the conference table for the first time in 8 years, she realized that sometimes the most important moments in life come disguised as ordinary days. Sometimes, being in the right place at the right time with the right skills is enough to change everything. But she was about to discover that exposing the fraud was just the beginning of her journey back to the career she had lost. Chapter 4. The Negotiation. 2 hours later, the conference room had transformed into a bustling center of legal activity. Maria sat at the head of the table, surrounded by documents in both languages, with both the American and Brazilian teams hanging on her every word. The afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, casting long shadows across the Manhattan skyline, visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "The issue with Clause 23, Maria explained, pointing to the relevant section, is that the Portuguese version specifies a 12-month transition period for employee integration, while the English version only guarantees 6 months. For a company with 1,500 employees, this difference could mean the difference between a successful merger and massive layoffs. Dr. Silvera nodded grimly. Our human resources team specifically negotiated for the 12-month period. 6 months would be catastrophic for our workforce. Henderson, who had been taking notes furiously, looked up. Dr. Santos, in your professional opinion, how many of these discrepancies were intentional versus simple translation errors? Maria had been dreading this question, but she owed them honesty. Based on my analysis of the pattern and the specific nature of the changes, I'd estimate that at least 20 of the 23 discrepancies were deliberately altered. The errors are too consistent and too advantageous to one side to be coincidental. Jennifer Walsh, who had been coordinating with the various legal teams, approached Henderson with her phone. Sir, I have the district attorney's office on the line. They want to discuss the fraud investigation. Tell them I'll call back in an hour, Henderson said, never taking his eyes off Maria. Dr. Santos, I need to ask you something directly. Are you interested in joining our firm as a consultant on this deal? The question caught Maria off guard. She had been so focused on the technical aspects of the contract that she hadn't considered the possibility of this being anything more than a one-time crisis intervention. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking, she said carefully. Sarah Miller leaned forward. What Mr. Henderson is saying is that your expertise in international business and your bilingual skills are exactly what we need to salvage this deal. We'd like to offer you a consulting position, at least for the duration of these negotiations. Maria felt a familiar flutter of hope mixed with fear. I haven't worked in international business for 8 years. I don't have current certifications, updated knowledge of regulatory changes. Dr. Santos, Dr. Ferreira interrupted. You've identified problems in this contract that 3 teams of lawyers missed. You understand not just the language, but the business implications of each clause. That's exactly the expertise we need. Henderson stood up and began pacing, his mind clearly racing. Here's what I propose. We need to rebuild this entire deal from scratch with proper oversight. I want you to lead the translation and review process. We'll pay you a consultant's rate, $1,500 per day. And if the deal closes successfully, there will be a substantial bonus. Maria's heart pounded. $1,500 per day was more than she made in a month of cleaning offices, but more than the money, this was a chance to reclaim her professional identity, to use her skills in a meaningful way again. There's something else, Dr. Silvera added. Innovair Solutions has been looking for an American consultant to help us with future deals in the US market. If this negotiation goes well, we'd be interested in discussing a longer-term arrangement. The room fell silent as everyone waited for Maria's response. She looked around the table at the faces of people who, just hours ago, had seen her as invisible. Now they were offering her a chance to return to the career she had thought was lost forever. I have one concern, she said finally. The cleaning company I work for has been good to me. I don't want to leave them in a difficult position without proper notice. Henderson almost smiled. Dr. Santos, I think we can arrange for you to give proper notice while still helping us with this deal. In fact, I insist on it. Maria took a deep breath. Then yes, I accept your offer. The next several hours passed in a blur of intense negotiation. Maria found herself in the unusual position of advocating for both sides, ensuring that the contract was not only accurately translated, but also fundamentally fair. Her years of experience, combined with her unique perspective, as someone who had lost everything and rebuilt her life, gave her insights that surprised even the seasoned lawyers. Wait, she said, reviewing Clause 37. I think there's an opportunity here that neither side has considered. Instead of Innovair Solutions licensing their technology to TechFlow, what if we structured this as a joint venture for the North American market? Both companies would maintain their independence while sharing resources and expertise. Dr. Ferreira's eyes lit up. That's actually brilliant. It solves our concern about losing control of our core technology, while still giving TechFlow access to our innovations, and it would reduce the regulatory hurdles for both companies, Sarah Miller added, her legal mind immediately seeing the implications. The antitrust issues become much simpler with a joint venture structure. Henderson looked at Maria with something approaching awe. Dr. Santos, you've just proposed a solution that could increase the value of this deal by 30%, while reducing the risk for both parties. As the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the two teams worked together to restructure the entire deal. Maria found herself not just translating words, but bridging cultures, explaining nuances that went beyond language to encompass different business philosophies and legal traditions. "I'm in Brazilian business culture," she explained to the American team. "Personal relationships and trust are just as important as contract terms. The fact that you're willing to start over and rebuild this deal fairly will mean more to Dr. Silveira's board than any specific financial advantage. And in American business culture," she told the Brazilian team, "speed and efficiency are highly valued. The fact that you're willing to work through the night to meet the market deadline will demonstrate your commitment to the partnership." By 10 p.m., they had a new framework for the deal. By midnight, they had preliminary terms that both sides could accept. By 2 a.m., they had a complete contract that was not only accurately translated, but also more advantageous for both companies than the original flawed version. As Maria finally gathered her papers and prepared to leave, Henderson approached her privately. "Dr. Santos," he said, "I owe you an apology. Earlier today, I dismissed you because of your job, not your qualifications. That was wrong of me, and I'm sorry." Maria looked at him thoughtfully. "Mr. Henderson, 8 years ago, I thought my career was over. I thought I would spend the rest of my life cleaning offices and trying to survive. Tonight, I remembered who I used to be, and more importantly, I discovered who I can become." "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from someone who has experienced both success and failure, who has been both visible and invisible. I can help your clients not just with language, but with understanding different ways of seeing the world." Henderson nodded slowly. "I hope you'll consider making this more than a one-time consulting arrangement." As Maria walked to the elevator, she passed the janitor's closet, where she had stored her cleaning supplies just that morning. It seemed like a lifetime ago that she had been worried about finishing her rounds before the lawyers arrived. Now she was one of the lawyers, or at least she was becoming one again. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside, her reflection in the polished steel showing a woman who had rediscovered her strength and purpose. Tomorrow, she would give her notice to the cleaning company, not with shame, but with gratitude for the job that had kept her afloat during the hardest years of her life. But tonight, she was Dr. Maria Santos again, and she had just helped save a $50 million deal while discovering that her greatest asset wasn't her ability to translate words, but her ability to translate dreams into reality. The elevator descended toward the street level, carrying her toward a future she had never dared to imagine just 12 hours earlier. Chapter 5. The New Beginning. 3 months later, Maria stood in her new office on the 38th floor of Henderson & Associates, looking out at the same Manhattan skyline that had once seemed so distant and unattainable. The nameplate on her door read, "Dr. Maria Santos, Director of International Business Development," and she still felt a small thrill every time she saw it. The Brazilian deal had closed successfully, creating a joint venture that was already showing impressive results. More importantly, word of Maria's expertise had spread throughout the international business community. Her phone rang constantly with requests for consultation on cross-border deals, and her calendar was booked solid for the next 6 months. "Dr. Santos," Jennifer Walsh appeared in her doorway. "Your 3 p.m. appointment is here. The representatives from the Japanese electronics firm." "Thank you, Jennifer. Please show them to conference room A. I'll be right there." Maria gathered her files and headed toward the conference room, but stopped when she saw a familiar figure in the hallway. Rosa Martinez, one of the night shift cleaning staff, was emptying wastebaskets with the same quiet efficiency Maria remembered from her own days in that role. "Rosa," Maria called out softly in Spanish. "How are you doing?" Rosa looked up, surprised to be addressed by one of the lawyers. "Oh, Dr. Santos, I'm fine. Thank you. How are you adjusting to your new position?" "It's been an incredible journey," Maria replied. "But I wanted to ask you something. Have you ever considered going back to school? I know you mentioned once that you studied accounting in Guatemala." Rosa's face lit up with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "I think about it sometimes, but it's complicated. My English isn't perfect and I have 2 children to support." Maria smiled. "I might be able to help with that. Henderson & Associates has started a scholarship program for employees who want to continue their education, and I happen to know that the accounting department is looking for someone with your background to help with their Latin American clients." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the Japanese business delegation, but Maria made a mental note to follow up with Rosa. Her own experience had taught her that talent and potential could be found in the most unexpected places. The meeting with the Japanese executives went smoothly. Maria's ability to understand not just language but cultural nuances made her invaluable in international negotiations. She had developed a reputation for creating deals that were not only legally sound, but also culturally sensitive and sustainable. After the meeting, Henderson stopped by her office. "Maria, I wanted to update you on the fraud investigation. Tom Bradley has been charged with conspiracy and fraud. He's cooperating with the authorities and has implicated several people at Apex Language Services." Maria nodded grimly. "I'm glad justice is being served, but I can't help feeling sorry for him. Desperation can make people do things they never thought they would." "Speaking of which," Henderson said, settling into the chair across from her desk, "I have a proposition for you. We've been approached by 3 other law firms about creating a joint international consulting practice. They want you to head it up." Maria raised an eyebrow. "What kind of practice?" "A specialized firm that focuses on international business deals, with particular expertise in preventing the kind of fraud we encountered. You'd be the managing partner, with offices in New York, São Paulo, and eventually Tokyo and London." The offer was tempting, but Maria had learned to think carefully about major decisions. "Can I have some time to consider it?" "Of course. But I should mention that Dr. Silveira called this morning. Innovare Solutions wants to offer you a position as their North American vice president. And there's a headhunter from London who's been trying to reach you about a position with an international consulting firm there." Maria laughed. "A year ago, I couldn't get a job interview. Now I have more opportunities than I know what to do with." "You know what they say," Henderson grinned. "Success breeds success. But more importantly, you've proven that expertise and intelligence can emerge from anywhere. That's a valuable lesson for all of us." After Henderson left, Maria sat quietly in her office, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her daughter Sophia, who was studying engineering at Columbia University. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. You showed me that it's never too late to reclaim your dreams." "Love you," Maria smiled, remembering the years when Sophia had watched her mother leave for work every morning in a cleaning uniform. Now Sophia was seeing her mother thrive in a career that utilized her skills and education. It was a powerful lesson about resilience and the importance of never giving up on yourself. As the afternoon wore on, Maria found herself thinking about all the people who had supported her journey: the cleaning company supervisor, who had been understanding when she gave her notice; the Brazilian executives who had been willing to look past her uniform and see her expertise; Henderson, who had been willing to admit his mistake and offer her a chance to prove herself. But mostly, she thought about the moment when she had decided to speak up instead of remaining invisible. That moment of courage had changed everything, not just for her, but for everyone involved in the deal. It had prevented a massive fraud, saved hundreds of jobs, and created opportunities for growth and partnership that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Her computer chimed with an email from the Japanese executives she had met with earlier. They were interested in retaining her services for a major acquisition they were planning in Brazil. The wheel was coming full circle. Her expertise in both cultures and languages was creating opportunities she never could have imagined. As the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Maria prepared to leave her office. She had dinner plans with Sophia, and they were going to celebrate Maria's success with a meal at their favorite Brazilian restaurant in Queens. Before leaving, she stopped by the cleaning supplies closet on her floor. Rosa was there, organizing her equipment for the evening shift. "Rosa," Maria said, "I spoke with HR about the scholarship program. If you're interested, I can help you with the application." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that for me?" "Someone once told me that we all have hidden talents and untapped potential," Maria replied. "Sometimes we just need someone to believe in us and give us a chance to show what we can do." As Maria walked to the elevator, she passed the conference room where her life had changed 3 months earlier. The mahogany table was polished and ready for tomorrow's meetings, and the floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the lights of the city below. She thought about the woman who had pushed a cleaning cart down these same hallways, invisible to the powerful people who made decisions that affected millions of lives. That woman had been brave enough to speak up when it mattered, and in doing so, had reclaimed not just her career but her sense of purpose and identity. The elevator doors opened, and Maria stepped inside, her reflection in the polished steel showing a woman who had learned that success isn't just about reaching the top, it's about lifting others up along the way. Tomorrow, she would make her decision about Henderson's offer to lead the new international consulting practice. But tonight, she was simply Dr. Maria Santos, a woman who had learned that sometimes the most extraordinary opportunities come disguised as ordinary moments. The elevator descended toward the street level, carrying her toward a dinner with her daughter and a future filled with possibilities she was only beginning to imagine. Outside, the city hummed with the energy of millions of people pursuing their dreams, and Maria was once again among them, not as someone trying to survive, but as someone ready to thrive. As she walked out into the Manhattan evening, Maria smiled at the irony of her situation. She had spent 8 years cleaning the offices of powerful people, watching deals being made and broken, fortunes won and lost. She had been invisible to them, just another piece of the building's infrastructure. But sometimes, being invisible gives you the perfect vantage point to see what others miss. Sometimes, the person with the least obvious power is the one who can change everything. And sometimes, the most important moment in your life happens on a rainy Tuesday morning when you decide to speak up instead of staying silent. Maria hailed a taxi and settled into the back seat, her reflection in the window showing a woman who had rediscovered her strength, her purpose, and her place in the world. The city lights blurred past as the taxi carried her toward Queens, toward her daughter, toward a celebration of second chances and new beginnings. Behind her, the lights of Henderson and Associates glowed in the Manhattan skyline, a reminder that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to make a difference. But tonight, Maria was simply grateful for the journey that had brought her home to herself. The taxi pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the river of traffic that flowed through the arteries of the city. And somewhere in a conference room 42 floors above the street, a cleaning cart sat empty, waiting for the next person brave enough to speak up when it mattered most.